podcast. I'm Dr. Sam, and with me is Dr. Robert, who you all know well.
Hey Sam, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. We have a guest today, which I absolutely love. I'm very, very excited to introduce Dr. Stephanie Morley with Vetlen. And well, you're the president of Vetlen, but you've kind of been involved in both sides of even practicing medicine and now the business side. So we're really, really excited to get a chance to talk to you and kind of learn a bit about your story and what you're doing, and just, kind of hear about you. So go ahead and take it away.
Oh, okay. Just off to the races. Yeah.
Exactly.
No, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here too. Yeah, so my name's Stephanie. I'm a veterinarian, and I've done a whole bunch of things since I graduated from Michigan State. Go Green. I started early in practice, small animal medicine and surgery. And through a whole bunch of reasons why I inevitably left practice, I'll summarize it with quality of life and a pretty stringent non-compete. And that forced me to leave practice. I got into lab animal medicine then, never expecting to ever go into that area of veterinary medicine. But it was incredibly rewarding, and I learned about a whole multitude of other species and how to care for laboratory animals, and quickly became involved in the operations of that facility. My undergrad happens to be in business, so I tend to gravitate towards all things that are business. So I ended up managing that facility, which was a really big job. We had 20 to 30,000 animals, and wow, anywhere from 600 to 800 employees I was responsible for. So incredibly rewarding. I also learned a lot about what it takes to get drugs approved, medical devices approved, diagnostics approved, and not just for humans, but also for animals. In some way, it's even more stringent for animals. So from there, I ended up at the University of Michigan Human Medical School. And I did business development for a group called Fast Forward Medical Innovation. So their whole thing was, how do we get things that are being developed in the university by physician researchers that have what we call commercial potential, or something that could actually directly impact patients' lives, and spin those out of the university and create business entities. So I was there to help connect those types of researchers to industry partners who would either provide them with dollars for research or potentially co-develop products out of the university. Oh, wow. So that's where I learned about licensing and tech transfer and kind of what it takes to take something from an academic idea to an actual product.
Which
and then I had the opportunity.
I can only imagine.
It's so much more than anyone realizes. It's it takes so much time, brain power, input from multiple specialties, etc. And then you have to just know what we would call like product market fit. Like, does it actually have a place in the market? And that's kind of where I came in. Was I was working with all these MDs who had these great products or ideas, and no one thought about taking them into veterinary medicine first. And I know there's a lot of reasons for that, a lot of economics we could go into, but nonetheless, I was really sparked by, but veterinarians could use this too. It could elevate our practice and our standard of care. It could help us improve our patient outcomes, et cetera. So I got an opportunity to co-found another company. And that's what I did. Was I essentially just went out and scouted for products that I knew had a place in veterinary medicine that I would have used when I was in practice, but also made business sense, right? Mm-hmm. And so I stayed with that company, and then we launched our first product. I left there. And then since then, I've been working with startups. I just love working with early stage companies and really helping them identify the best strategy to go to market, really understanding who their customers are. Mm-hmm. And that's how I got involved with Vetlen. So Vetlen is a spin out from a human device that they are actively developing it for the human sector. And they recognized it probably had some potential in vet med. So when I saw the device, I got super excited because I'm like, yeah, that has potential in vet med.
Yeah.
And so I agreed to come on board, and that's what I'm doing, is I'm bringing it to veterinarians all over the world come this summer.
Wow. So I have so many things went through my head as you were telling your story, because it's such an important thing to be able to really kind of understand, I guess, first and foremost, what that world is, what that looks like when people have an idea and they need to get it to the masses. Because I can tell you that, I come from a family of human doctors, and my dad's been developing something like forever, and he really can't. It's like very, very difficult to. I want to say like 10 years he's been spending on this thing, and it's amazing. And it's that's a story for another day. But but to see how hard it is to get to that next step, to get to that next level, I find that fascinating. So I'm curious a little bit more. Is it that people don't think there's enough money in vet med? Is it that they just are so focused on their idea they can't see the other ideas? What do you think that disconnect is?
Yeah, I think the reason a lot of medical technologies that are being developed for humans that don't get into veterinary medicine, the first thing you have to look at is the difference in the economics of providing human healthcare versus veterinary healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
So in human medicine, they have third-party payers, they have insurance companies,
Right.
which is a whole nother headache and a whole nother reason why it takes so long to get things on the human market.
Right.
But on the veterinary side of things, we don't have that. But that's not always good, because what that means is veterinarians function in a cash-based business. They themselves are a business. So I know I'm preaching to the choir, but hopefully you have some listeners that may not, I'm going to tell them something they don't know.
Right.
The cost of becoming a veterinarian is extensive. It's, over $200,000 in student debt on average. And that doesn't include undergrad. And then even the cost of becoming a veterinary nurse, if you go through some of the accredited programs, they're costly too. And then the cost of all the equipment, the buildings and everything else, there's an overhead cost to all of that. So we don't have insurance companies that ensure that we get paid for what we do and that potentially offer that service and that product, to a customer for less money. Mm-hmm. We just have to negotiate that with our customers. Our customers are the difference between, or are in between us and our client, which is our patient, right? And so we have to have products that we know we can afford to buy as practitioners. Mm-hmm. And then we got to be able to charge a little bit more to our clients so that we can potentially make a little bit of profit, because we literally have to keep the lights on and we have to pay all our employees, right? And so that pie is much smaller in veterinary medicine because we can't charge as much as human medicine.
Right.
Now, a lot of pet owners would probably disagree with that because they think they're paying an arm and a leg for it. But I often use ovariohysterectomy via laparotomy, right, as an example of, let's break down the costs in a human hospital for an ovariohysterectomy, right? Not even via laparotomy. So you're not even opening the abdomen.
Yeah.
Right. So we know that could be $50,000 versus our $800, right?
Absolutely.
But it's the same amount of training. It's the same tools that we're using. We're using the same anesthetic agents it's the same education to get there, et cetera. So how do you create products when that pie is so much smaller? And so there's a cost associated with developing the product. There's manufacturers involved in that. Mm-hmm. And then when you start pulling investors in, right? So now you may have had to raise money in order to develop your product, but now they expect some return. That's the economics that are different between human and veterinary medicine, which makes it hard to bring some of those technologies into vet med. There's just not enough money to make what we call a return on investment for investors. Mm-hmm. That's the biggest reason. Outside of that is, I think, there's not nearly as much specialization in veterinary medicine. Mm-hmm. So you can make a product for a hand surgeon that only works on pinkies, but you still could maybe make $1 billion a year, right?
Yeah.
But we have pinkies that if they were called pinkies, there's all the potential sizes in the world, right? I mean, our patients are less than a pound to several thousand pounds. So that makes it also very hard to identify products where you really can sell enough of them because our patient variability is so big. Mm-hmm. So those are probably some of the biggest reasons. And then there's nuances depending on the product. But
Yeah. And I
yeah,
guess that's what would drive most companies to say, hey, we're going to make our $1 billion in humans, and then we're going to do like a secondary, like, oh, well, guess what? We can also make money here with this thing that we're just going to repurpose.
exactly. And that's what happens is a lot of the products, and I didn't know this until I got in this side of the industry, a lot of the products that we have access to as veterinarians that are, I don't want to say it's sold to us like it's a bad thing, but we're told they're innovative and they're groundbreaking because they're new to us. They've actually been on the market on the human sector for decades, and they're just finding the next revenue channel for it because they're on to version 4, 5, 6, right?
Yeah.
And so, and I get that. I mean, those people have to make money too, and all of that. But I just feel like if some of the problems are big enough that if we can find the solutions that allow for those economics to give a positive return to everyone involved, then why don't we really try to focus on getting those solutions into veterinary medicine? But it is a little bit like a needle in a haystack. And then to your dad's point, I mean, the human side, the regulatory side, we have regulatory too about med, but it's a different beast. But the funding required, it's just so costly to get products onto the human market that it's probably the biggest reason why things don't make it all the way is you just can't fund, you can't find the funding.
Yeah. And I think people don't realize too, like how things start out really promising, but then maybe don't end up having the impact or whatever it is, and they don't make money. But in order to be innovative, you need to try 5 things and one thing works. And so they got to get paid and then pay for all those other 5 things. You know what I mean? And so people are like, oh, they charge so much. It's like, well, but there's more to it than just than that pill that ends up being made at the end of it. There's, however many that didn't make it through.
Exactly. Yep.
I think that's something that Sam and I have been working on. We've started with myBalto as a technology-based company for veterinary hospitals, but the investor part of it is such a big part in finding funding because there's a great book I read. It's like How to F Up Your Startup. And it goes into all the reasons that you can fail. Like literally all the reasons you're like, this is encouraging. I'm so glad I'm doing this. Yeah. But it's a big part of it because you got to make sure you have enough to start with, and you got to make sure you have enough to continue with things. And as you mentioned, investors are difficult. Like unless they're going to see a 10x on investment, like minimum, they don't want to be involved because it's either a lifestyle business or it's just not worth it for them to risk the capital because their goal is to find, 100 companies that they want to invest in, and hopefully one knocks it out of the park. So try and find those ones that all have that 10x potential, and it's not every company has that potential. So it's interesting to hear you say it from the human side of things too, because that's why we're so behind in veterinary medicine compared to human medicine.
Yeah, I've been involved in a lot of fundraising, and it takes so much education of investors as to what animal health even means. What is veterinary medicine? How is it different than human medicine? Why should I invest in this, et cetera? Despite the fact that veterinary medicine is one of the most recession-proof investment segments out there. Right. People don't stop spending on their pets. But that's another thing I speak to a lot is there is a difference between vet innovation and pet innovation. And there's a lot of money that goes towards pet innovation, right? Things that are direct to the pet owner. But there's not as much that goes direct to the vet. And the reason I'm pretty passionate about that one, you guys are getting me on all my soapboxes.
We like that though.
Yeah. The reason that's important to me is because a lot of money goes to the pet owner and to investing in things that are going to make the pet owner's life easier, or things that are directly for the pet. But you as a veterinarian need to have products that help you run a business. You have to be able to instill trust. You have to build rapport with your clients. They have to believe in what you're saying as a clinician. They have to see fast results. Yeah. They have to see fast answers because it's a cash-based business, and they can go down the street to the next vet hospital. And so if all the money is going into just who's the next Chewy, then we're missing a huge part of the value chain, and that's the veterinarian. And so but the products that we could potentially be making for the practicing veterinarian can be very costly. So that's what I mean. It's a needle in a haystack. You can find things like the product I'm working on now. The Vetlen pouch is not a cost prohibitive solution for veterinarians to use, but it's going to improve the standard of care for veterinarians. That's going to lead to improved outcomes for the patients. It's going to help them build their business. That's going to help them build rapport and trust with their customers. And then ultimately the customer is going to see a pet that's, you know, healthier faster, right?
Yeah.
And so finding those things that are just like, okay, this isn't going to break the bank for anybody, but it is going to make a really big difference in the practicing lives of veterinarians. That's the key of what you have to find, which is why I love to bring veterinarians into the conversation.
Yeah.
So I joked with you guys about being my market research, but I do a lot of market research. I want veterinarians to be part of developing this product, iterating on this product, selling this product, marketing this product, everything, because unless you have been in the shoes of a veterinarian or someone who works in a veterinary hospital, unless you've lived in that world, you have a very hard time really understanding what that role is and what life looks like. And so I like to bring veterinary professionals into as many parts of the business as I can, so that we are really making products together that are going to make your life better.
Well, I think that's a great goal. I mean, that's really wonderful. What are you going to say, Robert?
Oh no, I agree wholeheartedly. Just because I think veterinarians are unique creatures as it is. We most of us can't run a business. I'll be honest. Like when we go to school, I'm glad you have a business background, because most veterinarians don't, and you can see that in how we run our practices. That's why we give away. I talked to a hospital yesterday. They have like a 8 hospital group. They give away $1 million of free services every year to help pets in need. It's insane. Yeah. It's because they got big hearts, but they're not like, no business succeeds on that usually, because like that's 10 employees you can hire. That's right. Insane. So it's just that component of like understanding how veterinarians work, but they don't want to pay for anything either. So you have to find like.
I think it's because of where our energy goes, right? Like, everyone of you has only so much energy, so much bandwidth, so much time that they can do. So you're going to spend that time going, okay, I'm going to care for my patients. And then something comes along and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't euthanize this dog that has a foreign body that I can fix. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to give this away, or I'm going to do this extra thing for free or whatever. But then when you come along and you're like, well, here's this thing but I'm going to need 5 minutes of your time. It's like, well, I don't have any time, it's like,
right.
But maybe I don't have to sit here and, do 18 bandage changes while we are fixing a wound that's festering, because if I had just taken the 5 minutes with you, we would have fixed this when we placed this thing during surgery. So now we need to just, since you mentioned it.
Okay.
Why don't you mention what your product is? Just because people are like, what is she talking about?
Yeah. What is this thing that's so miraculous? So from a pet owner perspective, they actually are involved in the utilization of this device. So it is a real partnership between the veterinarian and the pet owner. But essentially it's a pouch that is placed in a wound. So a surgical wound, or a traumatic wound where infection is present or there's concern for contamination. From a pet owner's perspective, what you may not realize is it's really hard for us to get local antibiotics on a sustainable basis to a wound. Mm-hmm. So if your dog has a fracture, an open fracture, or some other traumatic wound, or had an orthopedic procedure and they're worried about contamination because a bite was involved or something like that, then usually your dog's going to go on oral antibiotics, right? And that's good, except we know that the amount of antibiotic that gets to the actual wound site when given orally isn't always as high as we would like it to be, right?
Yep.
And sometimes these things called biofilms can develop, particularly on any foreign body in that area, like potentially a plate on a fracture. And those biofilms are they're biological material with bacteria present that antibiotics don't break down easily. They kind of create their own like little ecosystem. And so having antibiotics delivered locally is really hard. And when you have biofilm trying to prevent biofilm or treat it, you really have to have high doses there. And we can't get those high doses with orals. And particularly some antibiotics are dangerous to give at high doses orally. They can cause toxicity. So this device is actually a rate controlled membrane. It's a small pouch that is placed into that wound before the surgery site is closed. And there's a catheter attached to it that is what we call exteriorized, but it's kind of moved away from the wound site and poked through the skin. Mm-hmm. And then the surgery site is closed just like normal. And at the end of that catheter is a port. And so now the veterinarian and you, the pet owner, can infuse fresh antibiotic every day directly to the site of the wound for up to 30 days. So the owner would be involved. If the patient goes home, the owner would be involved in removing any residual fluid that's in that pouch and then simply infusing the next daily dose of antibiotic. You're not poking the animal with a needle. There's no pain involved for the animal other than if it's a Labrador, it has to sit still for 2 minutes. But other than that,
but you can feed them, so that
you can get some peanut butter, you're good to go. So yeah, and that's all that's involved. And then to remove the pouch, it actually deflates. You deflate the whole thing just like you were going to remove the residual fluid, and you pull it through the exteriorization site. So for the surgeons and the veterinarians, it's to remove just like a surgical drain.
Like a drain. Mm-hmm.
Yep. You can actually infuse it with lidocaine ahead of time so that it numbs the area, but we've had patients where that wasn't done and they didn't react at all. But it's removed just like a drain. So it's really allowing veterinarians to put antibiotics exactly where they're needed. Mm-hmm. They can change antibiotics. So if your culture insensitivity comes back and it's wrong, you're using the wrong antibiotic, you can change it. And it's simple to remove. And because it can stay up for 30 days, you're really, if you have some really tough infection cases, then you're covered. And you don't have those same toxicity concerns with systemic antibiotics.
Yeah. So does it I have kind of 2 questions on that. One, can you put like a local anesthetic in there? So if you're using it for its intended purpose of administering antibiotics, does it also have the secondary advantage that you could almost use it like a soaker catheter as well and like put pain management in there too?
Yeah. So we've in all of our work, we've used antibiotics, and then we've used particularly aminoglycosides, and then we've used lidocaine. The drug profile for what you can put in there, essentially for the pouch to work, it has to be a water soluble drug. It has to be a small molecule, so under 2,000 grams per mole, and it needs to be approved for intramuscular or subcutaneous use because you are getting local tissue distribution. So you have to know you're not going to create any tissue irritation. Mm-hmm. Outside of that, in theory, you could potentially use other drugs, but as a data-driven, respectful, top-of-the-line medical device company, we are going to develop data sets to support as many of these use cases as we can. But we also know how I call veterinarians MacGyvers of medicine. Yeah. And so I know what vets do. So we are just very clear in that if you're going to choose to use this off label, here's your limitations. But really it is local drug delivery to the point of need.
Because I do feel like that's something that, so my mom's a plastic surgeon, my dad's a vascular surgeon, my sister's a general practice doctor, and none of them are veterinarians, but but I will tell you that like the OnQ pump and stuff like that, like in human medicine, so that's like a local soaker catheter that just delivers that. So that's when I first saw this, when I was watching the video, I was like, oh, that's kind of what that reminds me of. And I saw that it was about, specifically bringing antibiotics there too. But then I was thinking, yeah, veterinarians are definitely going to be like, so what else can I do with it?
Yeah.
I'll put one deep
like
for the antibiotics, one for the local.
Right. I talk to a lot of veterinarians, right? And I just got off of that soapbox. Yeah. Everyone I talk to is like, could I do this? What about this? We've already had veterinarians place them in animals where they weren't part of a formal clinical trial or anything. They just got their hands on it and they put it in an animal. And I just see that as it's a sign, it supports the mission, which is you have veterinarians who have something they have no other solution for. They're desperate for a solution, so they use it, right? And so far with the few animals that's worked on, it's worked well. So, but
I would think that there's a lot of different applications for it though too, where if you have it, you can grab it, especially like Robert, you probably have traumatic bite wounds come in all the time. And I've seen so many in general practice come back to me on recheck that maybe they closed it too quickly. They didn't give it time to become, to take it from a contaminated wound to a clean wound. And so it blew up. Not that you would do that, Robert, but I'm just saying, but I've seen it. And so I'm like, wow, if that was in there, then they'd be able to just kind of take care of that ahead of time and not worry as much about closing wounds, prematurely, would be my guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We'll be at the Emergency Critical Care Symposium this year.
Oh, nice. We'll be there too. So
I was going to say, hopefully.
Yay.
And hang out. I think it's such a great idea. And honestly, I can see the application just in ER all the time, like Sam mentioned. It's just all the wounds that come in. We do it to send them back to their private practitioners, but I like the ease of use. I think that's a big thing for both the veterinarian and the owner, because owner, you put something in their pet and say, hey, to manage this at home, their eyes get all wide and they're like, do I really want to do that? It sounds like a lot. And you're like, no, it's okay. This is actually an easy solution. Oh yeah, just screw this on here, inject something in there and take it off. It's easy. So I think having that in mind is such a powerful component of what you're doing. It's very cool.
Yeah, we're definitely trying to keep ease of use as one of the, it has to be effective, right? But ease of use for both the clinician and for the owner is imperative to its adoption. So it's a good business reason. But it also is just, we know how effective this can be for treating infections in animals. And so part of getting them treated effectively is make sure that their owners can effectively use it. So yeah, it's very simple. Yeah, I'm excited about it.
That's very cool. So I'm curious now, going back to just how you got into this, like, did this company, they came to you and said, we need your help getting to this next step?
Yep. Yeah. Wow. I kind of have, I just, through my career, you create your network. And I just have a reputation of being a veterinarian in a not too heavily veterinary populated world. Right. And so, people who think that there's a potential use case for their product in vet med call me, and most of the time I say no, I'll be honest. And like, nope, it's too expensive, or nope, no one's going to use it, or usually it's too expensive. But and I think the other thing is you get people who think, well, we'll just sell this in veterinary medicine while we're doing this human track thing, not realizing, okay, you don't just like pop up a poster and veterinarians buy it. We're a very data driven. It's exactly what you said about frugality. We're the same way with our requirements to use something. We want data. We want to know key opinion leaders have used it, but if there's no published research on it, but our professor at Michigan State University used it, then we're okay with it. Right? Yep. And we have to do that. We have empirical uses, like we have no choice. We can't wait for peer-reviewed articles on everything we try. But when push comes to shove, we still want that. And so, so a lot of people just think the track into veterinary medicine is far too simple, and therefore they're not going to invest in it. And that wasn't the case for this company. They were tell us what you need to do this the right way. And so first thing we did was start working with identifying key opinion leaders, getting clinical trials started. We're kicking off our first clinical trial in dogs this week, working on getting equine trials started, doing some PK work so that we can show what local tissue concentration is compared to systemic. So we're going to have all the data to support, like, yeah, it works. And then we're, off to the races. Then we're just relying heavily on word of mouth, because it also costs a lot of money to hire salespeople and do marketing and all those things. And I frankly don't want to spend all of our money on that. I'd rather spend it on data. So that's why we're just going to try to leverage our veterinary network, just get people promoting us and saying, yeah, it's great. So we're actually giving away a free pouch to anyone who wants one when we launch. So your first pouch will be free.
I was like, can I have one? I mean, I'm not a specialist, but can I have one?
You don't need to be a specialist. We're starting with specialists for some of our work, just because, as GPs, we all know we still like to see a couple extra letters after the name when it's a new product.
Right.
As a GP too. So, but we if you go to our website, there's actually a ability to click on a free pouch, and once we launch this summer, then we'll start sending those out. And then we also have a resident award. So anyone you know who's still in academia, who has residents, we have a resident award where we'll give $5,000 towards their research, as well as free pouches for any publishable research that they're interested in doing. So we want to get to the early veterinarians, the people who are just, developing their standards of care, and be something that's their go-to device. So.
And so sorry, go ahead, Robert. What were you saying?
We have residents at our hospital and interns. Oh. So I will mention that they're because especially when the new batch comes in every June or July, of all the new residents, they're looking for projects to start doing so they can apply for the next step. So I will definitely mention that to them. I think it's a very great idea.
I was just gonna say that too. I was like, every resident needs their resident, like their project that they need to do. So
right.
Yeah.
Yep, that's on the website too. So you can just send them there.
Very cool. I'm curious, are you allowed to say, like, is there a specific hospital that you're working with, or like, are there specific doctors that you're working with, or is it just whoever?
So I don't have any studies under contract yet with the academic sites that we're working on, so I hate to say them prematurely, but they're good ones. And then the clinical trial we're doing is with 2 boarded small animal surgeons, one in Utah and one in Texas.
Gotcha. Nice. I wasn't sure if you were in Michigan, if you were like grabbing some of the
I'm trying. I'm knocking on the door of that.
I was going to say, does Dr. Stanley know? She'll try out.
I know. I'm poking at all of them. So I did do a customer. I did do one market research interview with an equine surgeon at MSU. But I have reached out, and the hard part, it's no different than what you were saying about general practitioners not having 5 minutes to hear about this. It's the same thing with academic clinicians. They've got their teaching and their clinical and their research time, and so trying to get them to hear about some new product is tough. But I am leveraging that Spartan flag that I have as much as possible.
No. Yeah. Well, and actually a bunch of the surgeons left Michigan State, and they were all in like a place in Flint right now. So that's why I'm like, I don't know if you
you send me that way. If you have contacts, like we can edit this part out if you want, but if you know anybody, like I said, we're even pet owners, it's we're not really planning to do any direct to pet owner marketing, because this is truly a veterinarian device. So I want veterinarians to feel they don't need to hear about it from Dr. Google, but at the same time, I want pet owners to feel empowered by what this device can do for their pet. Mm-hmm. And it does take participation from them, but it's not scary. And it's
I think people understand how to empty a Jackson Pratt drain if you teach them. You know what I mean? And I feel like this is even more simple than that. So
it's just a lure lock.
Yeah. So I mean, I think it's very accessible. Yeah. What do you say, Robert?
That's one mistakes. Like, it makes it easy. Like, it's common sense. You screw it on, screw it off. Yeah. Like it's very nice and easy to use, and I think that's a big selling point. I think even just your background in general, be able to tell people, emphasizing those differences between human medicine and veterinary medicine. Like, there is a big difference, and that's why we are behind in a few of these things, because it's not by our choice. We like to be offering the same standard of care that you see when you go to the human hospital, but most of the time it's very difficult to get these products down the pipeline. Even if they're great products, it takes time, it takes money, and that's something that's not always available. So.
Well, we've learned a lot just even doing like with myBalto. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, everyone tells you every day, like, oh, this is a great idea. We really want what you're doing. It's really, really great. But it's like, you have to continually move the ball, move the needle. And it's not, it takes time, it takes money, it takes energy, it takes all those things. And there's a million good ideas out there, but not everything gets where it needs to go, So you just gotta keep working hard.
Yeah, it's a grind. Startups are a grind. But man, once you do them, they're hard to get away from.
You're the same people. You, my brother, the exact same people. He's like, I finish up myBalto, we'll go to the next one. I'm like, no, man, I'm a one and done. Like, I'm knocking this out. This is my mission in life, and then I'm going back to be the ER vet. So.
Yeah, I don't have that. I mean, I'm not trying to practice in addition to doing this. So I'll give you that. But having been in corporate America and then starting a company, I'm very I like this stage where you get to create it as you go, and you get to do things the way that you feel is right. It also just means you're wearing 16 different hats, you know? So, but that's okay. But I think back to your comment about veterinarians not being good at business. This is something else that I think a lot of lay people don't understand, is that we don't get taught business in vet school. You know, when I was in vet school, it was one practice management class. And it wasn't really, I don't even remember. I just remember having to write a budget to figure out, oh my gosh, my student loans, I basically can't afford to eat. Yeah. But it was more, I don't even remember what it was so much, but I think it's gotten better. But I think the thing too is that veterinarians see business as a 4-letter word, but like everything that veterinarians do is business, right? So sales is a 4-letter word, but you sell every patient interaction.
Every day. Yeah.
Every day.
Yeah.
Human resources is, you know, no one wants to think about that. But if you have staff, you're doing human resources. I don't like to do accounting, so I outsource it to an accountant, right? Like, so business to me is not, it's pretty instinctive. My undergrad was actually in hospitality business. So it was hotel restaurant management, but it was customer service based business. So it was focused more on managing the experience for people. Well, that's what veterinary medicine is, 100%. Or should be, right? So it's not like I can go out and all the things I can do on the business side, creating forecasts and, you know, all that stuff, it's just because I've done it before, but I learned on the job. I didn't learn that in my undergrad. And if I did, I'm too old to remember it. And so veterinarians do a lot more business work than they think. It's just, I think we also are perfectionists, and we have this belief that we're supposed to know everything before we can actually go out there and do it, especially us women. And that's just not true. You just find trusted people who, you know, who can do it for you, and you outsource. You just have to be a critically thinking person and be willing to call out when you think someone's not doing something right, you know? But otherwise, we're all business people, whether we're taught in school or not. We just have to, I think, be empowered to embrace the fact that that's what we are. We're more business people than human physicians, unless it's a physician that owns a practice, or a dentist that owns a practice, right? But so many of them are now in hospital systems. It's like that's different. They don't get the opportunity to learn all that stuff. But that's too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's the entire scope of that has changed enormously.
Enormously.
Just watching what my parents' trajectory versus my sister's. You know what I mean? Is it two different worlds? And their opinions and impressions of medicine in general are entirely different because of it.
Interesting. Yeah.
Well, I think it's really fascinating, and I love getting your perspective on things, and I find the way that you're approaching it is wonderful and very educational, like you said. So I think you've kind of set out to hit your goal of kind of letting people see what we're kind of up against and where we're at, and then that fact that you're working to try to fix it, I think, is something that we all applaud. So I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. It means a lot to me. So thank you very much for coming and talking to us today.
Oh, my pleasure. I mean, you guys are your startup too. I mean, hey, like, we got to support each other, man. Yeah.
That's the point. Share some of the good information, and hell, I'm going to talk to my hospital group afterwards and be like, hey, we could probably use this because I do have wound management on my end all the time. So it'd be great to have another tool that would help a lot of those topical treatments.
Yeah, send me a message after this, because we're also doing beta users. So if you want to be involved in trying the product before we launch, but be a little bit more willing to do some data collection for us, then we can get you pouches, within a month.
Yeah, I got plenty of residents I can talk to that need a new project. Okay. So I do that kind of stuff. So I think it's such a great thing. So thank you so much for your time today. It's been great about your history and see all the great things you're doing for our profession. So thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And if people ever have questions that we can forward to you, they can always email us at podcast@mybalto.com. And I mean, we really, really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you so much. I like specifically love wound healing, so that's always my thing. We don't see as many traumatic wounds as Robert does, but for sure a lot of times we're having to go back in and kind of fix things. So I think that there's use for sure in my practice as well. So I'm
Awesome.
fascinated by the
Good.
whole thing.
Yay.
Well, this has been the Positive Podcast. Thank you all for listening.